Hello, friends. I'm here with you right now with a special guest, a guy who was speaking at our conference in DC in August, Pete Vargas. And we had the most remarkable experience because we were there at the Trump Hotel. And I had not heard Pete before, but I knew about him because he was taking the vision for Seven Mountains and populating platforms and stages. Significant influencers were beginning to step out of the shadows, and I heard about him, and I got a hold of him, and his schedule worked out. And Pete, we had 100 people that were so captured by the vision of being able to craft the message, find stages, and monetize it and make a living doing what I do, talk. And 100 of them responded, and they're graduating now from your training, I think next week or something, and they're already finding stages. Some of them are finding TEDx platforms, and they're moving ahead. So what did you do? What are you doing with these people? And I want to make sure everyone here in my group can get access to what you're doing. So it just doesn't seem right to have 100 know about it, and everyone else needs to have a platform.
Yeah, Lance, you had me come share in DC. It was such an honor. It was one of the places that lit my soul up so much. And we got to share, my life was deeply impacted by a speaker 15 years ago. I brought in speakers into my community, and we brought them in. And one of the speakers we brought in, Daryl Scott, his daughter was the first girl killed at Columbine back in 1999. She got shot from a distance, and then the gunman came up to her and asked her, "Do you still believe in God?" And she said, I do. And they shot her right there and killed her. And the kid who was laying in a coma next to her was the one who came and told her parents that she died that day for her faith. But she left her family with 6 diaries in a journal called My Ethics, My Codes of Life that she wrote 1 month before she was killed, talking about how we were going to change the world and by starting a chain reaction of compassion and kindness. Well, her dad came and spoke. And he spoke, and just like your community who's listening right now, he knew he had a message and a story that he wanted to take into the mountain of education. He just didn't know how to do it. And he ran into the wrong guy, which is me, and your community is going to run into the right guy, wrong guy, whatever you want to say, because he came into my town and he spoke on a stage. And in 1 hour from that stage, my dad heard him. After my dad heard him, my dad was a very physical and abusive dad growing up. I was 23 years old, and at the time, we didn't have a good relationship. And I was the youth pastor of this group and of this small West Texas town. And he came in there and he spoke that day, Lance. And it prompted my dad to write me a letter. And he said, "I'm sorry for the father I've been. Here, my son is having an impact on hundreds of kids' lives, and I can't have an impact on my only son's life." He asked me for a second chance to do things right. And he told me he loved me for the first time in over a decade. I sat back and I wept and I cried with my wife. I prayed with my wife. I said, "Babe, this is a miracle." Like my dad's 7 siblings, his mom, his dad, my pastor, my friend who led me to the Lord, counselors, nothing worked growing up. And finally, 1 hour on a stage changed it all. It changed it all. And so I called Daryl. And just like we experienced in DC, Lance, you have a community of people who have messages for this world that we want them to raise up the 7 mountains. I absolutely am committed to that. I called Daryl, and he had a message, and he knew he was supposed to take it out there. And because Columbine was no longer in the news in 2003, and it had come and gone after 4 years, his message was beginning to not be as big as it was when it first happened.
Right.
But his daughter's story wasn't any less. His daughter's story was as powerful as when Columbine happened. And I called him and I said, "This is what happened with my dad and I, Daryl. And why aren't you getting this message out to the world?" And his response to me was, "I know I have a message for the world, Pete. I know that I can go change the educational sector or mountain or whatever we want to call it, but I just need to figure out how to do that." And I said, "Daryl, we've got to raise up the educational sectors. We have to get onto those stages. And when we get onto those stages and you share this powerful message, people are going to bring your programs back into their schools, and you are going to change the educational sector." Fast forward 13 years now, 15 years later, not only did we help take him and put him on thousands of stages across the world, including the White House, including Oprah, but we also helped him grow from $50,000 in revenues to $7 million on an annual basis was their peak year, Lance, using stages. And without the revenues, you can't fund the mission that God has put in your heart. And here's the beautiful thing. They're impacting millions of kids on an annual basis. They've seen dozens of school shootings prevented. They're seeing a teen suicide prevented every single day in school. And people are hearing about Rachel's story because of the fact of stages. So we fast forward 15 years to Washington, D.C. at the Trump Hotel. And we're there a couple of months ago.
Right.
And you said, Pete, I want you to teach the 300 people in this room how to get on stages and to be able to influence the mountains. And that's what we did. 100 of them responded. Next Wednesday, those 100 are graduating, and we're seeing such amazing stories in a very similar way of like I experienced Daryl impacting my dad and I's relationship. I feel called to raising people up across the 7 mountains and getting their message on stages, helping them understand how to be powerful on those stages, and making sure that people go deeper in their products and services. And you, me, and everybody there got to experience something powerful in DC.
And so your vision is really just put it out there. How many people do you want to raise up to do this?
Yeah, I want to put people. I want to see what we've learned and what God has put in our heart as the genius and brilliance that he's put in my heart. I want to see people on 1 million stages by 2027, impacting 1 billion people across the 7, I call them sectors, mountains, whatever we want to call them, but I want to raise people up across those 7 mountains to be able to be on the most influential stages that exist in our world, so we can have the influence in those sectors and on those mountains, and so we can take back the territory.
And what I love about that is you're talking about the most influential stages, because in reality, the thing that I teach is that there are ninja sheep as well as other type. And so the ninjas are the ones that are literally, such as we're watching it happen in America right now. And you're watching America go crazy because academic stages have been taken over by, the hippie generation from the 1960s all became professors. I literally listened to Ward Churchill's out there in Colorado in your territory. It was like a radical leftist. And it really convicted me because he said, I'm a professor. You know why? Because I've got something to profess. And so if you're a professor in a classroom, and for years, ninjas have been operating with progressive ideology, and they've taken over academia. They've been operating as journalists. They've taken over the New York Times. They've been operating in Hollywood, writing scripts, and now they're heading studios. And so what we got to learn from this is if you want to shape the world, you have to have a message. But isn't that interesting? That's exactly what Jesus taught anyway. Mm-hmm. He said, go into all the world and preach the good news. And so the good news for those that are trapped in addiction is you don't need to be addicted. If you're, for those that are that don't have a direction for their life, it's finding purpose. But you don't have to come off like Joel Osteen all the time. You can actually come off covertly. That's the story of Esther. So that's why the TED platform. And like when I started doing this stuff and I got invitations to the United Nations or at a Harvard event, I mean, it kind of freaked me out because at first, way back then, I thought there's a difference between the secular and the sacred. And I didn't want to get sucked into that worldly system. I want to just preach the gospel. And then I realized the parables are actually stories. The word parable is to come alongside. It's a story that comes alongside. So many of the people that are listening to us right now, you see what's happening in the world around you, and you're frustrated because you're looking at it like a runaway train, but it's because somebody has the microphone, and it's not the majority of Americans. As a matter of fact, it's a minority of Americans, but the left is brilliant at knowing how to grab the microphone. So we have to learn how to find our message, develop our message, and this is your genius, how to locate the stages where you can deliver it. And you don't have to go out as a right-wing flamethrower like me. I've decided to become that as I got older because it doesn't matter. As you get older, you don't care. So, but we want you guys and gals to be able to go out there and be as strong an influencer in culture as other people are, and that can happen. And you've got honestly a magic bullet, but you certainly have a 3-part formula. Just in broad strokes, What are the three emphases or the three areas of mastery these people need to know about?
Yeah, the three pieces of mastery I want them to know about is you have a message, and for us to pull that out, craft it, design it. So whether you're in a one-on-one conversation, you're on a podcast, you're on a stage, you're on a live stream like this, like you have a message, and we have a framework called the StoryBraid framework that God put in my heart like literally 15 years ago. And it's not just about inspiration. It's about educating, but it's also about people going deeper with you and converting to want to go deeper with you. And so there's this framework of the StoryBraid framework that God has used me to be able to impact thousands of people by helping them draw that message out and craft their message in such a way that's going to make a lasting impact and great change in the lives of people. That's the first part. You've got to be great on stage, because if we get you on stage and that message isn't clearly articulated, people won't ask you back to be on stages. The second thing, that's the second important part, is there are millions of stages. And if you want to follow your leader, Lance, Lance is on stages. Lance has built a movement and business on stages, a ministry on stages. A lot of people are trying so many things to get their message out there. There's so many bright, shiny objects out there that are distracting you from what I believe is the fastest way to get your message out there, which is online and offline stages. We'll have 15,000 plus people watch this. This is a stage. It's an example of an online stage. Lance has made people best-selling authors from a stage such as this. You know, there are online stages that your people need to be on. There are offline stages that they need to be on. There's millions of stages. And here's the thing that I like to say, Lance, that you might not have heard me say, is that people are trying so many other things. And when you think about stages, think about Paul. And think about the missionaries who went town to town and they spoke, and they had to raise support in order to sustain their ministry of going around. They were doing that from a stage. You know, think about all the things that have come and gone, yellow pages and phones and advertising and radio and TV, and even Facebook is changing somewhat. Like we're seeing engagement, like all of these different mechanisms over years. But stages have withstood the test of time. They're not coming, they're not going, they're not coming and going, they're not trendy. I want you to take the message that we help you craft and to get it on the stages that exist all across the world. And then the third part, Lance, and I want to warn the believers on here, because this is the part that makes them a little bit nervous, and you know how passionate I am about this. We have never changed someone's life with the speaking gig. But sometimes they buy our tapes and cassettes and we've got a shot at changing their lives. That's what the great Zig Ziglar said. And he said that I've never changed someone's life from a stage, but if they engage with me deeper and they go into my products, my services, my nonprofit, they invest into what my books, my programs, that's where I can change their lives, because Zig knew he could be in their ears all of the time. I talked with Tom Ziglar 2 weeks ago, Zig's son. And he said, Pete, I love that you're sharing that quote, because my dad used to round up all of the testimonials that he would get. And over here in this pile would be 99. This sounds like a parable. And over here would be 1. And he would read the 1, and the 1 would say, thank you, Zig, for changing my life. I heard you on a stage. And the 99 would say, thank you, Zig, for that event, for those programs, for those tapes, for those cassettes, because they changed my life. The third piece of this equation is we have got to resource the believers. Like, we want you to be able to attract revenues, and because as you attract income and revenues, you can sustain your ministries and your movements and the impact that the Lord wants to have through you. And so the third part that makes the believers kind of be like, oh, I don't want to be compensated or paid. I want you to be compensated and paid. I want you to be resourced, because that third piece is as important, Lance, as the first two pieces.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, and I think that we really got to I think most believers are consciously past it. I think they're unconsciously self-sabotaging because they feel guilty of receiving compensation for mastery. But in reality, without the cash flow, you lack the oxygen for your vision to expand.
Wow.
So you have to look at finances as the jet fuel in order to expand your impact. What you do with money reveals your values. But the fact that you have it is the one non-negotiable that enables you to get your message out, so that it's not drowned out by other voices. And there are many ways to monetize messages. And you cover, I mean, what I don't want people to miss is you have like 20 different platforms. Like we think about platforms like standing on a stage, but it's actually, we're on a stage right now. And so the stage is any platform that allows you to be heard by other people. But then the resources, you have like 25 different ways in which resources can be created. And, you know, writing a book may be a labor that many of you don't get to do, but it's not difficult to be able to capture your message and put it in a form where people can easily retrieve it. So you've got like 25 different methods of monetizing, 25 different ways of finding and locating stages, 25 ways of getting onto the stage that you locate. And then think about this. There are no new emotions. I mean, we're always talking about change as though change is changing everything. Think about this, there are no new feelings. And a well-crafted story pushes the same buttons when it's a parable in the first century as a greatly written scripted movie in the 21st century. And you're a master at helping people get the message. And there might be people watching that are wondering, well, what would I say? How, just as out of curiosity, how do you help people find their signature message?
Yeah, so the signature message is really, really important. And it's really the thing that God has put in your heart, like that you're supposed to take into this world. And so not only what is it that you feel like God has put in your heart that you're supposed to take into this world, but what mountain are you wanting to take that to as well? And so we've got to get really clear on your signature message and pulling that out and kind of abstracting that out of you so that we can actually begin to take that message, craft it, and then go find the stages within the mountain or mountains that you want to take that to. And so that's how we do it. Like, we really want to understand like what you do. And Lance, you know that we're going to provide the next couple of weeks so many amazing resources, including today some incredible gifts that are going to help them craft their talk right away, like craft that signature message. And so one of the great resources that we're going to give is that over the next couple of weeks, we're going to do what we provided in DC. We're going to provide a lot of incredible resources to really resource your community.
I want to get into that because you did me a favor and you promised you were going to make available to everybody some in-depth training you're going to repeat. And hopefully you've got those visuals and things that speak. Everybody had their camera out. It was amazing. It was like everybody's, a message is hitting home when everyone's pulling their cameras out and every PowerPoint that's up, everybody's taking a picture of it. And I just want to say something right now. For my audience out there, a lot of you may not know it, but you are a great awakener. You may not know it yet, but the fact that you've never done it doesn't mean you don't have a message on the inside of you. And one of the confusions that happens is what Pete teaches is once you've identified a starting point, I got people that love education, they love family, they obviously want to see people touch for the Lord, but they also want to do business. And here's what you got to do. You turn this horizontal picture sideways. And what you realize is you start with one first starting point, the easiest one you have a platform in. Then once you've mastered vertically going there, the door opens to the next platform. Then the door opens to the next one. So many of you want to change the world all over the place. Pete will help you get your first vertical totally. In other words, you're going to go down into the mountain. And then you're going to go to the next one. And literally, when you master the first one, the doors open in the next one. I didn't start with political discourse. I started with the church. And then I went to business. And in business, I proclaimed 7. And from 7, I got sucked into the vortex of Donald Trump's campaign. But you're going to help break this down for them. And you've actually been kind enough to offer a series of educational experiences for my group. And it's a special workshop. Tell them what they need to know about that.
Yeah. So today, like as you're watching this, like go to advanceyourreach.com. Like we want to help you advance your reach, advanceyourreach.com/Lance. And here's what's going to kick off next week. We have a workshop that's kicking off next week that's about 10 days long. And we're going to do what we did in DC over the course of these 10 days. And then we're going to conclude those 10 days with me and Lance coming back on a live webinar where we're going to do some advanced training for all of you. So this workshop's going to go for about 10 to 12 days. And then we're going to, at the end of that workshop, Lance and I are going to come back to you and do a webinar and really bring home what it is you need to do in order to get your message out to the world. So if you go there over those 10 days, you're going to get your message crafted, your first talk crafted. You're going to get on stages and understand all of the stages that you need to get on, and how do you find them and how do you get on them so you can go influence people. You're going to understand how to do that. And the third thing that we're going to do is, how do you actually attract resources to be able to make sure that this is lasting? So that's what the 3-part workshop is all about. We're offering it to all of the community here free of charge. And there's 2 more cool things that we're giving to you as you go to advanceyourreach.com/Lance. We're not only giving you, we're going to get your first message crafted. And so you're going to have your message crafted on a 1-page template that we have that we're going to help you. But we're also going to give you the inside track on how your leader, Lance, has used stages and speaking in his ministry and in what God has called him to do out into the world. Because you see him on these big stages right now, but it didn't start there. It started on small stages in one vertical. And so we've got a 24-minute interview where we interviewed Lance on how he got started and how the Lord has exponentially grown the platforms and the number of people that he's speaking to. So all of that is your gift as you go to advanceyourreach.com/Lance. And this workshop kicks off next week, but you'll get a few gifts between now and then. And the reason we're doing this now is because Lance is heading out to go do some work on a stage on a cruise ship, which is pretty amazing stage. So.
That's the beauty of it. I mean, that's my wife's gig. And she said, "Hey, I'm speaking somewhere, and I get to invite someone else to speak." And so I ended up joining her. But for those of you that are couples, do this program together. I mean, you need to share this too. Share the link. I've got the link up here right now. So share that link with your friends, because if you could do this with 2 or 3 other people, you actually can create a synergy between you. And ministers do this. Yep. I mean, like you'll see Cindy Jacobs and Dutch Sheets and Chuck Pierce. I watch them they do events together, and each of them draws people out, and then they all have a larger audience. Another thing that's really important, Pete, I want to know is you guys that are watching this special advanceyourreach.com/Lance event. When you do, understand that when you know what Pete teaches, you can have 100 people in front of you, and you will transfer more wealth out of that group. You'll be able to sell products to that group to take them further. And you yourself can earn more with 100 people than I've done with 1,000 people, never understanding how to do this. Because I'd hold up, a $5 tape series in the back of the room. And I really didn't comprehend what you're going to get is like, a compressed lifetime of learning in one simple experience. I can't tell you how invaluable this data is. And Pete, I just sat down one day with you and started to map out all the material I've got, because I've got 20 years worth of content. And you literally helped me get more focused in one day on how my university needs to operate than I've had in 10 years talking to experts, because that's your gift. You create the executable templates so that people can find their stage, find their audience, and monetize their message and make an impact. And if that's for you, if you're in my tribe and that's what you're all about, we've got the clock is ticking. We need to be influencers. You want to talk about a great awakening? We need an awakening right now in the body of Christ, that our messages have got to go out, and we can't simply pray. We have to be available to answer the prayer and go out and open our mouths. And so Advance Your Reach, we've got the link right there under us right now. And you see you got some other gifts coming along. Are you allowed to tell us what the other stuff is, or is that all supposed to be top secret?
No, at advanceyourreach.com/Lance, the big thing I want everybody to know is, like, I was in DC a few months ago, and I saw the way that people responded to this. Lance saw it, Mercedes saw it, everybody saw it. And it lit my spirit up on fire, because I know that God is using me to equip you to get your messages out on a grander scale. We've done it with Daryl Scott. It started with him 15 years ago, and now we've seen thousands of people, thousands of students all across the world that we're helping make this happen. And my heart that day, as I heard the believers share their stories and messages in DC, it was just like my spirit was lit up on fire. And so now to know that it's not just a few hundred people, Lance, but we get to take this to thousands of people within your community is really, really exciting. And so yes, you're going to get the workshop free of charge that will be rolled out starting next week. You're going to get a tool that we use to design our talks for all of our students immediately. That will be immediately when you go in there and you submit your information for the workshop. You'll get that. And you're going to get Lance's behind the scenes 23 to 25 minute interview that shows how Lance started using stages and speaking to get his message out to the world, how it started small and how the Lord has grown it so much more. And I want you to know it's only getting started. I believe God is about to supernaturally do something to another level. That's how our paths came across. I heard of Lance Wallnau teaching. I went to hear him speak at Charis Bible School. I solicited him and tracked him down into a room. And I said, I believe there is so much more that the Lord wants to do with your message, Lance. And I believe God has given me the gifting to be able to help you do that. And a year later, we met here in my home where we mapped out his strategy for how we were going to get the message in him out on a bigger scale and how the Lord was going to resource that. And now in this training, Lance, we're going to do the same thing for your community and your people as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say it again, that in every field, there needs to be a reformation. We need you to wade in to the harvest field in education, to wade into the harvest field in families. I mean, America is so adrift in the chaos and cacophony of theories and ideas that are not grounded in biblical reality. And we need a company that can think like, it's like, I love the saying, because Daniel actually and his friends, they thought like Jews, but they spoke Babylonian. You have to know how to speak in the language of the culture around you, but think like a Jew. You have to think with the biblical worldview. You'll be shocked at how far God will take you, because once it's like a hot knife through butter. There is so much ambiguity and confusion in the world that when you show up, the atmosphere literally cleaves open for you. And Pete's going to help you to learn how to show up. And I'll share with you what we've learned over the last 5 years, really exploding in terms of reach, simply because we're really focused on a few fundamentals that work. So yeah. Pete, can't wait. And so they're gonna, and when is this going to be showing? AdvanceYourReach.com. They sign up now and they start.
Yeah. When? So a couple of gifts will come right away. There will be a gift that comes right away this week. A couple of gifts that come, both they're getting their talk dialed in and their message out of them, and the behind the scenes interview with you. Those will come immediately. And next week on October 18th, the workshop starts, and it will be for about 10 days. And then you and I will conclude that workshop with a private special training that we will host for all of your community, that you and I will host for all of your community when you're back from this awesome cruise where you will be speaking on a stage. And so, yes, please go to that link today, get registered, share this video if you don't mind. And not just this video, share the video and the link for other believers who want to get their message out, because this is an incredible opportunity the next couple of weeks for us to really help you in that.
Listen, man, that's Pete Vargas. Just brought his name up there so you can go check it out. And I can't wait to see what happens, because we had 100 already launched and go through, and we're already seeing the results. So let's get 1,000 people to be masters of stages, and let's work synergistically and raise up the ninjas that can go into all the world, which is all the systems, and make a massive difference. Pete, thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to join me before I take off for the Mediterranean. And I'll be broadcasting and keeping in touch with all of you. Share this message, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in these trainings and meeting you on the road as we're going around the country, starting a movement.
Hi, I'm Lance Wallnau, but you already know that. Did you know that you can subscribe, however? You just push that button right there or over there and ding. Now we're connected. Look forward to seeing you soon.